an 18-year-old female living in a small town in Michigan. When this incident took place, I'd been working a few hours a week in a small pizzeria. It was in my town, and I had been working there about a year when my boss decided to go on vacation. She and her family lived in an apartment below the restaurant, and 2 other apartments were overhead. In order to get to these apartments, you had to go to the back of the building and down a sketchy set of stairs or the grass slope, where you would find her door and the stairs leading up to the apartments above. Beyond that, there is a yard and then some woods. I think it's important to mention that there was absolutely no reason to be behind the restaurant unless you were trying to enter the apartments. Now, I usually worked with my mom because we got stuff done easily, and I hate answering phones. One night, my mom was feeling ill, so I had to work with another lady. She was very sweet, not super efficient, so I was working hard to keep up, and getting a bit agitated when she told me that we need Parmesan. I agreed to get it from the store just down the road, but she promised not to make me answer the phones for the rest of our shift. There were only 2 hours left, which were normally pretty slow, so I guess it didn't matter that much anyway. As I was getting into my SUV, I saw a guy pull into the small parking lot with a beat-up car and park near the back. He was lanky and wearing oil-stained shop clothes, which was, and still, totally normal around here. He got out, retrieved a bag from his trunk, and headed down the slope. I know this guy wasn't a renter because I had never seen him before, and the renters frequently ordered pizza. It was possible that he was a friend of one of the renters, but that didn't seem right. It was 9:30 at night, and one renter was a single mom, and the others were 2 brothers with mental health issues that were pretty antisocial. I was getting a bad vibe, so I grabbed my knife from the center console and tucked it up my sleeve. Call me paranoid, but there'd been a lot of car fires and break-ins around at that time, so I was nervous to go anywhere unarmed. It might have been a stupid thing to do, but I considered my boss a friend and didn't want this guy to hurt any of the renters or steal from any of the apartments. I decided to go see what he was doing, just in case he had any ill intentions. I got out of my car and walked quietly to the slope. There was motion-activated lights, so I could easily see what he was doing. He was fiddling with an old key ring and trying to get into my boss's apartment. "What are you doing?" I asked loudly so that my coworker could hopefully hear me through the open back door. He was startled but smiled and told me that he worked for my boss's husband and was there to feed the dog and let it out. His smile was creepy, the kind the liar gives you when they're trying hard to convince you. My boss did have a dog, and her husband did own a fabrication shop, so his story seemed to check out, but I still was not convinced. I decided to go get the cheese and check again when I got back. "Okay, let me know if you need help with anything." I tried to sound as normal as possible, but I was seriously creeped out. I hustled at the store and back to work. I'd been gone only about 15 minutes when I got back, and surprisingly, he'd already gone. I was still feeling suspicious and bad for the dog who'd been shut in for a good portion of the day, so I decided to text my boss when I got out of work. Fast forward 2 hours, and I was on my way home. I got to my door when I decided to check Facebook. As I'm scrolling, I saw something that made my stomach drop. It was a picture of my boss with her dog on the beach from earlier that day. I called my boss and then the police to make a report. It turned out the guy had been fired by my boss's husband earlier that week for making an inappropriate comment about his 19-year-old daughter and repeatedly harassing other female staff. The guy had planned some sort of revenge scheme, but didn't know they had left for vacation. His bag was full of tools and a couple of knives. During questioning, he told them that the only reason he left was because he thought I was watching him. Thankfully, he went to jail for that, and a couple of other things that he had been wanted for previously. This still creeps me out to this day, and I hate to think what would have happened if they had been home. After college, I had a low-paying job for a while, so I lived in a rough neighborhood. One sunny Saturday afternoon, I'm at the crowded laundromat. Since I brought all of my linens and comforter, in addition to the usual amount of clothes, several hours pass. By now, the sun is going down, and one by one people are finishing up, and leaving until it's just me. It's now fully dark outside, and still about 40 minutes until my comforter will be dry, when a huge man walks in. Even though I'm above average height for a woman, this guy is easily 6 inches taller than I am. And you guessed it, he doesn't have any laundry with him. The hair immediately stands up on the back of my neck. I square up my shoulders to my full height and look at him with my best attempt at bitch face, with the idea to convey something like, "Hey man, I will pick you out of a lineup." He must have taken this as some kind of invitation, because he starts saying really crass things, while laughing and smiling, and asking if I have a boyfriend. When I don't reply, he starts walking around the island of washers in the middle of the room to get to me. At the same time, I'm walking around the other way, so we are no closer to each other. Unfortunately, this puts me at the back of the place, out of the view of any windows, and him close to the door. He flashes a big grin, and then locks the door. At this point, I'm plotting what to do next. My keys are in my pockets. I can put my keys between my fingers to try to use as a weapon, or I can have my car key ready to unlock the door as fast as possible to get away. I decide to try to run for it, since he has a major size advantage and would probably overpower me anyway, with my backup plan to cause as much damage to him as possible if he gets me anyway. Visualizing myself ripping out an eye, biting a chunk out of anything I can reach. All of a sudden, he runs to the center of the island of washers and vaults over it to try and grab me. I'm in full flight mode now. I swear I could feel my adrenaline glands rocket out the adrenaline blast that must have had me set a land speed record. Somehow, in what felt like a millisecond, I'm at the door to the laundromat, lock unlocked, out the door, at my car driver's side, car door unlock, inside car, ignition on. But he's there too, grabbing at my arm as I'm flooring it, peeling out, tires squealing, like a maniac with him still holding onto the door after losing grip of my arm. With my car door wide open, but still getting away, he's pounding on my trunk until I'm far ahead. In my rear view, I see him still running after my car. This is pre-cell phones. I drive to my friend's house, probably blowing through stop signs, can't really remember the drive. Bang on the door, and she lets me in. I tell her what happened, and we call the police. I file an incident report. The police and my friend and I go to the laundromat, and I collect my stuff. And finally, I go home. It turns out the guy had a warrant for his arrest for aggravated assault and some drug charges. I never saw him again, and I hope no one else has either. Myself and my mother were driving. Where? I can't really recall because it was so freaking long ago, but I do remember her pulling up to a stop sign. We seemed to be sitting at this stop sign for what seemed like the longest stop ever for a stop sign. I remember her looking both ways. She looked right, she looked left. Then I remember her gazing at me from her rearview mirror. She had such a gentle smile upon her face, as a loving mother would, looking at their child with such love. Just then, her face went to joyous to complete worry and panic. I see her eyes pan from me to the seat next to me. I hear the back passenger door open. As I'm turning my attention from my mother to the noise of the car door opening, I see this man entering the car. He sits next to me and continues to tell my mother to drive. There was a different kind of vibe from this man. He didn't seem to be fazed by either one of us in the car. Even the fact that he had just hopped in a car with people he didn't even know. He seemed so very calm, said very little, but enough to get his point across. He had long salt and pepper hair. At the time, I thought he had dreadlocks, but as an adult, I believe his hair was just most likely ratty from not washing or brushing it. His clothes were worn, torn, dirty, and dulled from the sun. I remember seeing his toes peeking out of these, what were once black work boots. His jeans were tied together from where they had been torn and ripped. His skin seemed so badly sun-kissed and filthy from a lack of bathing. An odor was coming from this gentleman that truly had my nose hairs curling. The smell filled the car. I could tell my mother could smell it too because she kept wiping the back of her hand across her nose. My mother told the man she wanted him to get out of the car. Her voice, she was trying to be stern and demanding, but she was such a kind-hearted woman that her yelling sounded like she was singing. So, of course, the man disregarded her chirps. He sat back in the seat and said, "Drive, please, just up the way." I so badly wanted to glare and stare at this man, but I didn't want to upset him. I'm leaning as far as I can against my door with my head down and hands in my lap. I can feel the car jerk forward. I can hear my mother breathing heavily as she's worried about this man in the back seat with me. I can't say I was really scared of him. I was more curious as to how he could just so boldly get into a car with strangers and be so cool about it. I was always taught to never take rides from people I didn't know. So where was he going? I had thought. Where does he live? I can only imagine the things that were going through her mind as she's driving a complete stranger up the street with her kid in the back, with him not 3 feet away from me. The car continues to drive down the road a ways more. Then he leans forward from the seat, gazing out the window, watching the scenery go by, his hand on the handle of the door. He says, "Here." My mother jerks the car to the dirt, the car skidding to gain traction to bring the car to a complete stop. His passenger door flung open, and he bolts up and out from the car. He didn't even get a chance to close the door himself. My mother had sped off so fast that the car door slammed shut. Then I heard the car doors lock.